Many people expected the Tampa Bay Lightning to struggle a little bit early this season. That has not been the case. Josh Sperber of Locked On Lightning is here to talk about that and a new milestone for Andrei Vasilevskiy. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Lightning, Josh Sperber. And Josh, some pretty good things going on right now down in Tampa. Let's start with Andrei Vasilevskiy. 300 wins faster than anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, significantly faster. It's not like it was just a game or two. He had 31 games faster than Jacques Plante, a legend in between the pipes. And he's the first goalie to do it in under 500 games, one of a very small handful of goalies to do it with just one club. And that's something that Vasilevskiy himself was especially proud of when talking about this entire milestone. So, I mean, it's really incredible. You love to see the support that he's gotten from his teammates, especially, and just a full stadium. Literally did not see an empty seat on Saturday night when he got win number 301 against the Devils, all to celebrate, in my opinion, the greatest goalie in Tampa Bay Lightning history. And, you know, he's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best in the game right now. And it's just amazing to see him do something so impressive so quickly in his career. I mean, he's been in the league 10 seasons now, still pretty young, still in his prime, but it still seems like there's so much more that he can do. It's really just been a pleasure to watch him and to cover him for this season.
And not only does he, end up winning number 301 on Saturday, it's a shutout to celebrate it even more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you can say that these are his two most impressive wins that he's gotten for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm honestly a bit more impressed with the 3-1 win over Winnipeg. I remember last week when I was talking about this on Locked On Lightning that, it kind of reminded me in a different sport, in baseball, of when Alex Rodriguez was chasing his 500th home run. He went into a massive slump when he was at 499. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 1 for 37 or something like that. Some awful line. And Vasilevskiy definitely didn't make that bad of a downturn, but he had a 4-game losing streak when he was in the net for all 4 of those games. And the Lightning were in all 4 of those games. There were games that in some ways or another just slipped through their fingers. And then, a week off happened. So, that's just how the Lightning schedule worked out this year. They had a tough loss to the Flyers of all teams. And then they come back and face the Winnipeg Jets in a week, the best team in the NHL by any metric right now. Vasilevskiy stonewalled them, and the only shot he let past them was a rocket of a slap shot on a power play for a wide open defender that I believe got tipped in past Vasilevskiy while the Lightning were already leading. They never trailed in that game. They haven't trailed since coming back from their bye week where they had a week off between games. And, you expect great things like that shutout from the Devils against the Devils. And that's still very impressive. But to get win number 300 in the middle of a 4-game losing streak against a team that has been dominant. And by the way, he was a couple inches away from scoring a goal in the empty net to just put the icing on the cake. I mean, it's just, he's truly remarkable, and he's truly one of the best goaltenders that I've ever watched.
One concern that this team may have right now, the scoring is very top heavy. You have 6 players with a point a game or better, and then not a lot of scoring after that. How big of a concern is that, and what can the team do to address it?
Well, I think part of that is, even the first and second lines have been flip-flopped quite a lot this season because of some injuries. The biggest concern that I have is that Lightning fourth line. Yes, those are guys that aren't going to be getting too many minutes. No one on the fourth line averages too much more than 10 minutes a game. But of all the players who've been on the Lightning fourth line, on that line, only 1 point has been scored. It's just not been it just hasn't been that much success. But I mean, the defense has really improved over the last two games, leaps and bounds, just so much achieved over the course of that off week for the Lightning. And their defense looks really rock solid. The offense is going to be able to score against anyone. That much is clear. That I don't think anyone doubted, regardless of people who thought the Lightning would struggle at the beginning of the season. And in some ways they have, but they're still in a good position, particularly at that early point. But I mean, I think that, it's like we've been talking about. The defense is certainly the biggest concern for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. But I think that it's going to start looking a lot better once they get, to full strength on the offensive side. Some of that I think can help translate to defense, because the Lightning are an offensive minded team. So even their defense is still got offense thinking in the back of their mind as well. That's why they're one of the highest defensive scoring teams in the league as well. So the defense is definitely the chief concern.
Talk to me about the return of Ryan McDonagh. He's leading the team with a plus 11. What does he mean to this team, and what does him being in the locker room mean to this team?
I honestly think that his locker room presence and his leadership are his biggest asset. He's still a very good defender. You can tell that, in his advanced age, he's 35 now. He's lost a bit of a step, but he can still bang. He can still get physical with anyone. He can still stop the puck. And him and Eric Chernak are just a dynamite partnership. That could be a line one defense on a couple of teams in the NHL. But because of the presence of Victor Hedman, you're going to keep them together on that second line. And it definitely adds a lot to it. Again, with the defensive struggles that the Lightning have had this season, I don't think that's been as evident or as talked about as I think it can be. But one thing is very clear. His physical presence on the ice and his leadership presence in the locker room are crucial for the Tampa Bay Lightning's success this season.
So, I mean, we've seen some really good hockey. We've seen, as you mentioned, some slumps by this team. Is this team for real, and why or why not?
I'm going to say yes. I think, I'd like to see more consistency, particularly on the defensive side and in their passing, before I really start calling this Lightning team contenders. I still think that they're a playoff team. I don't think they'll get higher than third place in their division. I think they'll be on the lower end of wild card teams, but I still think that, with what we've seen from Tampa so far, they've shown flashes of brilliance on defense. You've got a battle-tested legend of a goaltender in Andrei Vasilevskiy, who's going to be in between the pipes during the playoffs. But, with some of the injuries that they've had, whether it's been guys like Point who have missed a couple of games or some other players who had been playing banged up during the Lightning's first month of the season, once they get their guys back, I think, give me another month or something and ask me this question again, because they have the talent, I think, to contend with any team in the NFL and the NHL and beat any team in the NHL. So I think that if they can really shore up their defense, make a deadline move or two to add some more depth really on both sides, on offense and defense, I think they can be a contender. I do think this team is definitely for real, and teams should not overlook them, because Steven Stamkos or not, they've got plenty of talent. Jake Guentzel is filling in incredibly for Stamkos, and in a lot of ways, it's like Stammer never left, because Guentzel has been that good. But I'd like to see more consistency before I start calling them a contender. But the Lightning are going to be a legitimate challenge for the rest of the NHL, and I think that they could be a dark horse if and hopefully when they do make the playoffs.
All right, Josh, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
everywhere. Now, my Twitter handle is at Josh_Sperber, Josh_Sperber5 on Instagram as well. You can also find Locked On Lightning at LO_Lightning on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate, a like, a follow, a subscription if you're into Tampa Bay Lightning hockey as well. And hoping to see you guys in the comments and all that.
All right, Josh, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.